How's it going? My name is Dr. Jonathan Locust Jr. I'm the CEO of ConsiRise. And this is the first episode of our podcast, How We Heal, which is going to talk about the stories and experiences that people are healing from, as well as balancing their modalities of healing and any types of learnings that they feel comfortable sharing from those experiences. And one of the things that for my first episode, I'm excited because I'm having an opportunity to talk to someone who I've been knowing for quite some time. And as the idea came up of how we heal, I was talking to my friend Dave. He hit me back the next day. And Dave, I'll just kind of just turn it over to you real quick to provide a quick context of kind of what got us to this point of how we're talking now.
Yeah, thanks, John. So as John was kind of explaining his idea to me about starting a podcast to kind of support his company, ConsiRise, the name itself, Ways to Heal, I've resonated with me because of where I am in my personal life right now. My dad's on here as well, and we'll share more later. But we have in real life been going through our own healing process of reconciling our relationship and so I just thought it'd be the perfect opportunity for us to kind of have that conversation on your podcast so that, that we can learn from it, but also, those listeners will be able to kind of pull from these stories and learn from it as well. So thought it was a neat opportunity. I'm glad you were able to put it together and excited to start chatting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I appreciate it. So we'll have Big Dave and Little Dave. So that's how we'll refer and differentiate. But I want to kind of just start by, and at any point of time, please feel free to share again as much or as little as you all feel comfortable. But from the context that I have, is we know that addiction is something that impacts many different communities. We also know that crack cocaine has been something that addiction has impacted a lot of different communities, the Black community, people in a lot of different families, and kind of to set that premise of the background of the healing. I want to start with, and Big Dave, if you want to maybe share a little bit about your background, your upbringing, and kind of maybe your relationship with Dave before the addiction.
Okay. Thank you, John. And thank you, D3, as I call David. So just a little background. I was brought up in a middle-class family, mother and father in the home. My mother was a school teacher. My father was a customer service rep for our electricity company in the city. Very well brought up, middle-class family, no real trauma going on in my household. But around 15, 16, that crack hit the scene. And when that hit the scene, it's crazy because as I look back, as I was young, I smoked, reefer with the kids and everything. And, we did, run in the streets, but no hard stuff. And I remember the first time that I hit crack, I remember like, oh, shoot, I got to have more. I remember that thought, but didn't really dive into the fact that it would take the next, 27, maybe 30 years of my life away. Now, as I say this, I'm around 16, 17. David's on the way. He's not born yet. I also have another young lady pregnant at the same time. So life is starting to hit me really hard, really hard. I enrolled and started at Central State. I was 18 when I started there at Central State while I had both children on the way. I can remember being very difficult. It was very difficult at that time because um, just skipping ahead, once David was born, child support started. And once David and my daughter Camille were born, child support started. I was a student, and it was really hard for me to navigate and function. So I started, what do they call the street life? Since they were taking my income tax and all my checks, I started selling drugs. And of course, the next 30 years of my life, that's pretty much what went on. Me hustling, trying to get more drugs. My relationship with my children was uh, it was horrible. I was a horrible father. The time that I did spend with David, looking back, uh, provided more trauma for his life. A lot of things that went on as a young man for David. I look back and I see that for him being successful, God did his thing. Because as a father, I don't really think that I provided what was necessary. What was great was, though, he had a grandfather and a grandmother who took up the slack. So coming to this point here, this healing point, just having these discussions today is waking me up. It's waking me up. I think I'll have a little more to share a little later. Kind of got lost, but that's the beginning of what happened with me around my early teenage years.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And Dave, I'll ask you the same question. Just maybe share a little bit about your background and a little bit about the relationship prior to the addiction.
Absolutely. First, Dad, thanks for, just for sharing. So from my perspective, I was born in 1984 in Toledo, Ohio. As my dad obviously just explained his side of the coin and where he was around that time. My mom was 15 years old at the time that I was born. And she, just kind of going back, her parents did not raise her. She was raised by her grandmother and her granddad. Her grandma died when she was 12, and her granddad was too sick to kind of continue taking care of her. So she ended up falling into the foster care system. And so when I was born, my mom was in the foster care system. We were living in a group home. And that's what I remember, that's from my mom's story telling me about birth. And obviously what was going on with my dad, you can kind of just imagine it's just my mom. She's 15, trying to figure out how to go to high school and raise me. By the time my mom was 21 years old, I have three younger brothers. So my mom's 21 years old, 4 kids, and and our dads are, they're caught up in what's going on at the time in the 80s. And so coming up for me was just kind of, I had to learn everything very quickly. So being the oldest of 4 boys, and my mom being that young, I saw myself as soon as I could remember it as the man of the house. So playing sports, I looked at that as my ticket to pretty much figure out a way for us to get out. Like my mom did a really good job of the inside of our house and our home, and she ran a tight ship. Grades always had to be up to par. You had to be on schedule, keep your room clean. Like we had a good home on the inside, but we also lived in the Woodruff Village apartments in Toledo, Ohio. And then one thing that I even learned younger was it wasn't just me that kind of was in this situation. Like every kid over there, and I'm talking about, I have dozens of friends from that neighborhood. It's like we all were in the same situation. Like our moms are there, and it's very rare that we saw dads. It's like everybody's dad was caught up in the same thing, whether it was selling it, whether it was using it, or some was jack boys robbing people for it, but everybody was caught up in it somehow. And these were things that I sort of recognized when I was 8, 9 years old. I kind of started tying these things together. And so as my dad mentioned earlier, not only my mom kind of obviously kept us straight, but my dad's parents were very influential. My granny and granddad, I always attribute and say that was the secret weapon that I had that everybody else in our neighborhood did not have. On weekends, my granddad would pick me up on Friday. He was a referee for football and basketball. And on weekends, I was with him at a high school game or a high school or sometimes a college game. Just kind of, I realized it just kept me away from everything else everybody was getting into in the neighborhood. And if I wasn't with my granddad, I would call my granny. Then I would go hang out at my granny's house. And that's how I got close to all my dad's brother and his 2 sisters, because I spent a lot of time with them. And my uncle was only 5 years older than me. My aunt's 7 and 10 years older, but we had a good relationship. And so, although I had those circumstances, I still had some good examples around me to kind of help keep my grades straight, keep me active in sports, and enough of a guide and a spiritual compass to at least not make too many stupid decisions while I was out there. So I stayed out of trouble for the most part. And I was able to, to make my way to college, attended the University of Cincinnati, and we'll get more into the story, later on. But those were the circumstances of me coming in, and to get myself to this point where we're going back in time, and my dad's in the better space, and we're talking and having discussions and kind of unpacking a lot of what happened and where do we go from here. And I kind of like the space that we're in now. So I'll kind of leave it there and if let you go to your next question or where you want to take it from here.
Yeah, Dave, and I'll stick with little Dave. I'll stick with you. So you hit upon this a little bit by talking about what life was like, how your experience was similar to the other people in your neighborhood, but that impact of your grandparents of being there. Can you just talk a little bit about what that absence felt like of not having Big Dave there, and then how you were able to kind of deal with that?
Yeah. So I'll say it kind of, I'm 39 years old, so I call it's been stages. When I was a kid, for instance, call it 7, 8 years old, all you had to do is say my dad's name and I'll start crying, because there was something in me where I wanted him around. I didn't know how emotional I was about it, but kids can be cruel. We tease each other a lot, we make jokes a lot, but we would drive by. It's a homeless place in Toledo called the Cherry Street Mission, and my brothers would be like, "Yo, dad over there," and then I bust out crying. So like my adolescent years, I was very sensitive about it. It was just like, I do want my dad around. He's not around. He's, so sensitive. And then you fast forward to like my middle school, beginning of high school years, that sensitivity and that anger turned into like, all right, I'm going to use this as motivation to be good at sports. And to, I wanted to turn it into something. It became like a energy. I wanted to kind of like over be a man. I'm gonna be everything that he's not. Like I started to use him as a motivation. Like I'm gonna not be like my dad. I'm gonna figure something else out, figure things out with my life. And I think that's, those late 90s, early 2000s, when hip hop's also very like masculine. So you start to take on these tough personas, people I'm hanging around. And that's when sort of my first introductions to, I don't want to say I was in a gang, but everybody in the neighborhood I grew up around, Toledo's a blood and Crip folk neighborhood, and wherever you grew up, that's sort of who you cling to. So I hung around, I was around, but I wasn't in it. And so I sort of dealt with his absence. I guess what I'm saying is I filled it with other gaps, whether it was sports, whether it was friends around the neighborhood, if it was some like street situations going on, I've always sort of been shielded. And on a spiritual note, my mom and grandmother told me when I was really young that during a prayer session that my granny and my aunt Yolanda had, it was professed over my life that I will have many fathers. I never forget it. My granny has a tape recording where they're praying in tongue, and it's professed over my life that I will have many fathers. And so in terms of that absence, every coach that I've ever had in every sport, I've always had favor with. They would pick me up. I was doing everything on my own. Like I would ride my bike from the Woodruff Village to Smith Park by myself, which, John, I know you're not from Toledo, but that's probably like a 5-mile bike ride for an 11, 12-year-old kid every single day to football practice, every single day to basketball practice. I took myself to these things. And so when it was raining or bad weather or you needed a ride somewhere else, there was always a coach in whatever sport that would come pick me up and take me home. Or even in high school, Coach Bates, when I at Libby, he picked me up every morning to go to school sometimes when the weather was bad so that I can get to practice in the morning. So I always had a fill-in. I always had somebody who saw that I needed, just something at the moment. And that's how the absence was dealt with physically. Emotionally, like I said, it's been stages. I've been through stages of anger, stages of just absolute disgust, stages of just being very sad, shameful. I mean, I remember having a conversation with my cousin Carlton about wanting to change my last name, which that's another story within itself. Like all my records from elementary, middle school, and high school say David Jones, my mom's last name. But when I went to go get my driver's license, we found out my birth certificate and everything was actually under Oxnard. And I literally had like a long discussion with my cousin, was just like, I don't want this out. This is the shame period, is what I call it. I didn't want the name. Like, I wanted my name to be Jones, or I even thought about, I had found out that our great 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 grandfather that was a slave is Tolliver. I was like, well, let's just change it to Tolliver and let's create my own. Like, that's how angry I was. Like, I didn't want the name. And so yeah, I've went through a lot of different stages of how I've dealt with that absence. And I guess up to these most recent years, which are probably the most productive therapy. Talking to a therapist the last 5-6 years for me has been life changing, because it finally gave me the opportunity to have this conversation, but out loud to somebody, and it's not just in my head. You start to process all the emotions, process all the feelings, actually think about my dad as being a human being who just got caught up in something, as opposed to this terrible man who refused to raise his kids. So I was able to change the narrative in my head of who my dad was and what he was, through therapy and through prayer and through going through these things. And I think that created the space that allowed me and him, when he was ready, I had the space to be able to receive and receive where he was and accept him for where he was. And that's been like how our relationship's gotten built up to where it is now.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And Big Dave, I want to for one, because I know Dave said Lil Dave Lil Dave said a lot. Is there anything that you either, before I ask the next question, anything that you either want to either respond to or just say based on the things that Dave just mentioned?
So I'll say this. Every time I hear David talk about my failures or the lack of fathering, it stings, still stings. And I was just sitting here thinking, wow, God sure lets things be revealed in his time when everybody is ready to deal with it. Because if he would have said any of those things to me, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to accept that truth, his truth. So no, I am grateful to hear this information, because as an absentee father, I always wondered, but I was never man enough to ask. I always wondered how, why, this, that. Why'd you do this, that, or the other? And how did you end up here? But I was never in a space where I could ask until just lately. So no, I don't have really much to add to that. It was very interesting hearing how he navigated. And I'm grateful that he had multiple fathers. Grateful.
Absolutely.
I can't say, just to add real quick, sorry, John.
No, please.
It was a conscious decision to not lash out. Like, I knew that, like, there were moments in time years back where I knew, like, I'm angry, and if I have this conversation now, it's not gonna be productive. And so I avoided you for a lot of times, because I knew, like, what would come of that conversation. I've watched other people and their dads. I've watched people, I mean, literally come to fist fights. I mean, you and DeAndre got into a fist fight. So I just knew, like, if I say this now, it won't help anything. So I'll just keep my mouth shut, because I didn't want to be that person that's just angry and just lashing out. And it probably came out in other ways, but in terms of, like, the way I treat my parents, both my mom and my dad, is I understood that they were young parents, and I started understanding their life before mine, which means anytime I was angry or sad or whatever, instead of telling them, I would make excuses or empathize with their situations to be like, well, they probably don't really need to hear that right now. And so when you said that, it was just like, it was a conscious decision to not say anything, because I wanted, when we did talk, for it to be able to go somewhere, as opposed to me just venting and lashing out and being angry.
Okay.
And Big Dave, I do know that, and even from us talking a few days ago, I know that there were certain I would say reconnection points or touch points that you and little Dave had. But during that period, I would say how was kind of your either perception or feeling about your relationship with little Dave?
So, uh, and so this may sound harsh, but as a crack addict, you don't have time to think about anything else. You don't have time to think about children, eating, bathing, any of those things. Your 100% focus is chasing that and chasing that and chasing that and chasing that. So the information that I'm talking about is 8 years old. I'm 8 years sober, going on 8 years sober. I remember when I got sober this time, I remember telling myself, don't call David, don't call Camille, don't call DeAndre, don't call mom, don't call dad. Just don't smoke no crack, and everybody's going to find out you're not smoking crack. So I had no plan to reconnect because at that time of my life, nobody wanted me around. So it was no reason when my mother said, stop calling me. When my father said, you can't call me anymore, I knew, or it was a time for me to put up or shut up. I was 49 years old when that happened. I needed to put up or shut up. And it wasn't until I got maybe a year and a half, 2 years clean, did I first call my father. My mother and them, because of Facebook and the posts that I had been posting, they kind of had seen that my life had changed a little bit. But as far as reaching out to my children, I wanted them to hear about my successes from somebody else other than me. So I didn't even try. I didn't make an attempt. And then when I did make an attempt, I think the harshest thing David has ever said to me in his life, he said. And he had every reason for saying. He stated to me, and I quote, Dad, I need to protect you, protect my children from you. If you can show me 10 years of consistent sobriety, we might be able to revisit it. And I took that as serious as possible. He was serious. He gave me amount of time that I needed to put in before I could be a part of his life. And that's kind of what I set out to do. I set out to prove, okay, all right, I can be consistent. If nothing else in my life, I can be consistent with you. So that laid the groundwork for what we're doing now. Just that one conversation. Okay, I will give you a shot to be in my life, but it's going to take about 10 years. That's what I got out of that. So,
and for context around that time frame, so 2015, 16, 17, that's when my younger two children, Ariel and David, were born. So, and Sydney, I had been, dad at that point up from, Sydney's 9 years, 10 years older than them. So my experience as a dad, obviously it made me a lot more like aware of like, oh wow, so like the things that he wasn't doing, they're actually not like, that's when I started thinking about the drugs. Like they really do take all your attention because the actual being a dad part, it's not that hard. It's not easy. We're all dads, but it's if you're around your kids and you don't have those things in your way, you can do it. So there was like there was like this grown set of anger that I started having because I was just like, oh, now I'm doing it. And I see it, it's not that bad. I mean, teaching myself how to change tires, how to cut grass.
I can remember you telling me, Dad, it ain't that hard. How come you couldn't do it? I remember you asking me that. I do remember you asking me.
And then also speaking to like this, I was probably being an asshole saying like 10 years. But I was angry. But also my trust level was broken, like shattered, like not just with you, but like I watched my mom's mom and dad were also addicts. And so like I've watched my entire life, ever since I was a kid, my mom would be in the room just crying for no reason because the in your life, not in your life. My grandparents on my mom's side, I would see them and then not see them. So the same thing I'm dealing with my dad, I'm also dealing with my grandparents. And in 2015, 16, 17, I'm also dealing with that with my brothers. So I have 3 generations of drug addictions happening all at the same time while I'm trying to figure out how to be a dad. And so I didn't want nobody around me. I protected my kids from everybody. I made a rule. If I don't care about blood, it's really how you're living your life is who gets to be around. And that rule is just sort of, it still exists today. And so I have an experience with addiction that I do think is unique, because I've spoken to so many different people who usually have, a parent or a cousin or something, but like my direct bloodline, the people that are around me, it's like it's inescapable. And so one thing that I did know about addiction and recovering from it is it takes consistency. And once he actually showed that consistency, I had to actually wake myself up and say, wow, he actually did not what I was asking, because it wasn't for me, but he actually did it. And I had to make myself create space, for a relationship. And it started with my kids. I was just like, well, I don't want to block them from having a relationship with their grandfather. I want them to have, because at this point now I have pride in being an Oxnard. I've given it to my kids, so now I want to strengthen the bloodline by showing them, like, this is your granddad, and things like this will eventually, they'll be able to look at it and say, wow, that was granddad's life, that was my dad's life, and they were able to do this. So I just think it's an important part of our lineage to be able to have this discussion and to be able to tell this story in a way to where I do think future generations of our generations and other people who will be listening will be able to grow from and see that it's possible to reconcile these things.
Big Dave, let me ask, how many years have you been sober?
Well, I have 8 in August.
Congratulations.
It'll be 8 in August, yeah.
Seriously, a part of the healing process, especially as we go through things, and we hit milestones. Those milestones, I personally believe, need to be congratulated. So I want to say congratulations to you personally for 8 years of sobriety, again, to even be to the point to how you are now. And I do want to ask, kind of as you were talking, that moment of reconnection, when you and Dave, little Dave, started to reconnect. Can you talk about how you were feeling, kind of what you were going through, and how that process really started to begin?
Well, so a little background. My mother and I have established a daily relationship. And so she has been, how should I say, advising on how I should address Dave. And I am a bull in a china shop. I'm a bully. I'm a social bully. When I get in the room, I usually take over the room and don't, that kind of person. Well, that's me. But when it came to David, I didn't want to hurt anymore. So I stepped back, and I'm still a different person around David. I still take, because yes, he is my son, but he has more experience in life issues than I do. So I take a back seat to David in a lot of areas, because he has more experience on the positive side of things. So getting back with him, I was so nervous. I'm gonna tell you, the first time I drove to Cincinnati to spend some time with him, I think David had forgot I was coming, and he was out of town, and he had to put me up in a hotel. I was in that hotel, and I was like, see this Negro, I'm talking to him. I'm kind of angry. I'm kind of angry, like, I told this dude I'm coming, man. He ain't even here now. He got me up in his hotel, but no, he had me up in the presidential suite with, gold all around me, and I'm like, okay, well, he looked out. But that was the first episode of us feeling each other out, I think. I don't know if you ever seen a boxing match. The first 2 rounds, they feeling each other out. And I came feeling him out. And thank God for the kids. Thank God for the grandkids, because that's a mutual. I think he understood that I was there at that time more for the grandkids than for him. I think the grandchildren paved the way, showed that so let me share this. I have 6 kids altogether. I have 3 of my own. When I got married, I got 3 more. Well, the 3 more, Trevette, Sonny, and Karina, have come to me in the last month or so and just sat down and said, man, who are you? You're nice. You ain't cussed nobody out, and you ain't fussing, and you're not shouting at people. And who the hell are you? Is what, Trevette said. He said, man, I don't mind being around you now. Things like that. And so I guess that consistency piece, what was necessary. I, on a daily basis, make my mind up not to be an asshole. I have it in me. But one of my major catchphrases that I say to myself is, David, keep your big mouth shut. Nobody asked for your opinion. David, don't butt into that. Mind your own business. So that's what's going on there. I have really taken a back seat and let David allow me to do what I can, if that makes sense. Because, like I say, I'm a bull in the china shop. But once he let me in for the first weekend, I almost wanted to move down there. I'm that kind of guy, So it's just piecemealing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, too, and I can really appreciate it. Even I think about like the metaphysical aspects and the healing process of how what's in you internally has changed to your how you're meeting and how you're interacting with other people have also changed, where you're putting out more light and people are attracted to more light, right? We try to find higher vibrations of light. And because you have been doing the healing work of increasing your internal vibrations, of course, that's going to have an outward expression. So it's awesome to hear like a kind of another concrete example of how the healing process of what you and Dave and some of the other things that you have been experiencing is manifesting itself with your relationships in other ways.
And it's not just the relationship with David, because the rest of my children are looking. They might not say anything, but they're looking. The rest of the family is looking. David is one in every family, where our family's kind of been blessed with 10, 11, 12 knucklehead cases in our family. And around 49, 50, it seems like everybody's coming to. I don't know if you guys are seeing that as well. When the addict gets around the 40s and his 50s, either they come to or they just go on to the bitter end in that miserable life. But once a person comes back, the family has to be able to embrace him. And then he turns. And so what's happening is, because me and David are able to communicate and able to mend our relationship, that is paving the way for Trevette, Sonny, DeAndre, Camille, and the rest of them, because that's all they want to see is a success. It's success. That's my family. I don't have a family for the haters. I have a family that wants you to be successful.
Mm-hmm. And little Dave, I'll ask you, what can you talk about like that moment for you of when you really was just like, okay, we're going to reconnect, and maybe it was the getting them in the presidential suite, with all the gold and platinum and everything all around. You ain't say platinum, but I put that in there. So what was it? What was it for you? What was the kind of that moment of, okay, this is going to happen, and then how were you feeling?
So like he said, my kids, I had made a promise to him that I wasn't going to block him from being around my kids, but I still wasn't necessarily all the way ready to like open up and just like talk. But so my first was like my kids, and my kids are very, they're not sheltered, but they have like, they read energy, I think, in the same way that I do, like, especially my son, David, because he don't talk to everybody. He don't come to everybody. He literally will look at you and not talk. Like if he don't, I don't, it has to be an energy thing. And so the first time, every time he's been around my dad, he's just like open. There's just more life in him. And so I knew spiritually, energetically, my dad has to be doing something right for my son to even be around him, because like I say, I look at them as meters. Like same thing with Sydney, same thing with Ariel. If they don't like somebody, like Ariel and Sid, they'll say it. I don't like her. I don't like this. I don't like that. Or my son will just shut down. He'll go in the corner. So the fact that they gravitated towards him, it at least let me know his heart and his energy was in the right place. And then confession. So when you came and I got the hotel, I just wasn't ready. And I didn't have the kids that Friday night. So I was like, I literally was talking to my friend. I was like, man, he coming today, but that means he would have to be like at the house where it's just like me and him by ourselves. And I was like, I'm not ready. And so I had a lot of Marriott points. I literally booked him a really nice Marriott around the corner from where I lived at. And I got the kids the next day. The kids were my buffer, basically. They were my buffer. But our buffer, yeah. And so what made things the most beautiful thing that I think I've experienced, and which has kind of like sparked my recent spiritual journey, is when he told me the next day, he told me like, David, thank you for getting the hotel. You know, he's taking care of a lot at home in Toledo and family. He's like the only man in the house. So he was just like being able to just relax and just sleep and just be. I felt good about, okay, I was able to provide that. But then he said, you don't know this, but like, this is the anniversary of my sobriety. And I'm like, oh, wow, I had no clue. This is August 19th. And then he was coming in town for my son's birthday, which is August 20th. And so I put two and two together and I was like, wait, what? Like, you know, in this world, John, that you and I been in, of law one, of numerology, of astrology, of trying to piece it all together. Like, I don't have a definite answer, but I know I see 444 a lot. I know I see 1111 a lot. I understand that God works in increments of sevens. I don't have proof, but I do have proof. You know what I mean? It's not an accident that on August 19th, my dad said, okay, I'm tired of this. And that was his final like foot stomp. And the next day my son was born. That's about as spiritual of death and life that you can get in real time. I ain't gonna say never, but that's one real time example that I've had of like spiritual proof that there's a higher power working on his time. Because I mean, I don't have no other way to put it. My energy just said, get him a hotel. I'm not ready. The next day I get information, it's my son's birthday, and I'm reflecting like, I think it's time. So that weekend was when I said, okay, I need to do more work on myself to create space, and I'm not gonna block it. I'm gonna just let it be. And from that point on, he's come back and visited some more. He's come to stuff. The kids they know who he is. Like the relationship that we have now started that weekend, and that realization that divine timing was definitely at play in terms of when he decided to stop. It allowed my son to be born. And I'm talking about even 7 being a number. That's 7th anniversary. Like this last year for my son has been such a growth year. I'm talking about like there's something about the genetics of of family, and when one releases a block, it literally allows the flowing of energy to the rest of everybody else. I'm having a burst, my son's having a burst. So yeah, I do. I remember that, and consciously kind of avoiding it, and that avoidance ends up turning into, I think, the foundation of where we are now.
I think I'll just say real quick, Gabe. I think what you maybe mentioned is like a resonance that once those insights that the experiences that you all are gaining, those insights then resonate throughout the people in your group, the people in genetic, whatever it is, it resonates with, there's a resonance with the people who actually need that. Were you about to say something, Big Dave? I want to make sure I don't cut you off. Were you about, if so, please.
Uh, no, I was just, as I continue to hear and we continue to talk, just little caveats of information. So it's crazy how August 19th happened, because I was arrested on the 1st and I spent 19 days in jail. Now, when I got out, I had the option of continuing to get high or do something different. And I had those 19 days to think about that. David, I've been to the penitentiary 3 times. So I've done real time before. 19 days is nothing. But those 19 days, I remember asking God for some help, because I had no idea how I was going to function when I got out of jail. And I remember clean, just as pure, you'll be all right, son. Just follow directions. And so I got out on August 19th. And now I claim that day as my sober day, because it was impossible for me to smoke crack in jail. And I'm not sober if I don't have the availability to get to what I want. That's not sober. You just can't get there. But the day that I could get there and didn't, that was my sobriety date. And I'll tell you this, God has taken that taste for the alcohol and drugs from me before, but I've never wanted to keep that taste out of me until just now, until this run. He's shown me so many things that I've missed out on, and so many ways that I'm needed, that I better stay doing what I'm doing, because it's pretty much, it's everyone knows now that if I go back out, if anybody go back out after this much time, they pretty much die right then, right there. Don't want to die like that.
One of the questions, and you all both have kind of mentioned on it, but what steps have you both, processes have you both begin, as far as healing, that you all have either did individually or as well as together?
Um,
Go ahead, David.
we haven't taken many like conscious steps together outside of just keeping like communication open. Individually, one being therapy. 5 years ago, probably way more than now. I don't go as much as I used to, but 5 years ago, I was going a lot, because that was my opportunity to, like I said, it wasn't only just my dad's stuff I was dealing with, but it was also other family members that I was dealing with. So it was just a lot weighing on me at the same time. So a combination of therapy. John, to be honest, speaking, our conversations about the Law of One and spirituality over the last 6-7 years that we had, like those were very helpful, because we both, I think, discovered that life is much bigger than us. There's just a lot more at play. There's more planets at play. The universe moves just in so many different ways. So a lot of times the conversations you and I were having was helping me just process life and process my purpose and my why. And it helped me go from being angry to being, okay, instead of being angry, how do I take this energy and transmute it into something positive? How do I turn this experience into something positive? So that part, always trying to find purpose and not allowing myself to sit in anger, and understanding the negative energetic consequences and repercussions of staying in an energy that's not productive. Like I've had and have depression bouts where I'm really, really low, and nobody knows it. Like this is probably the first time I've said it out loud outside of a therapist, but like I've shielded a lot from my kids. Like they don't know it, because I recognize when I have that low energy, before I get back in that house or before I'm around my kids, I got to find a way to get back positive and stay positive, at least until they sleep. And then I can deal with my stuff on my own. And so therapy, and then you got prayer. I've probably been way more consistent in listening to just more podcasts, Joel Osteen, TD Jakes, just keeping the word, not necessarily trying to go back into church, but just keeping that consistent flow of positive messaging and spiritual messaging in my ear. I mean, like every single day, it's a part of my routine. Also, Inky Johnson has a podcast where it's just constantly talking about positivity. So in the same way that you have to like recover from stuff, I think it's the same way you have to like get yourself through, mental stuff that you're dealing with. Consistency and routine, working out, yoga, and most recently this last year, yoga has been like, it's been a lifesaver because now not only now I'm able to add something physical to what I understand what's going on energetically, like knowing which chakras are bothered, knowing where some of my trauma is stored, and then going on YouTube and finding a yoga practice that literally allows me to release that energy from myself. Over the last year, I would probably say about 75-80% of the trauma that I've felt right here in this region for my whole life and never knew what it was, I've been able to get off me through breathing and meditation and yoga. And so I'm one of them people that's, I guess I've tried it almost all, like not everything, but I've tried a lot of stuff to kind of get myself in a mental space to where I'm clearing that energy and clearing that space off of me. I'm constantly being forgiven. I'm giving grace, and not judging, just allowing the moments to kind of just play out how they play out. But yeah, so I've kind of incorporated 3 or 4 or 5 different things at different times to kind of help me along and stay productive with where it's going.
Thank you for mentioning those things as well, especially some of the things that you mentioned, which I think is a benefit of ConsiRise, is you no longer have to go to YouTube and possibly look at somebody who's not trusted or does not have ratings or did not go through a process of being vetted. So one of the things that we do is we do vet our practitioners. We do make sure that whether it's a certification or some type of training or experiential that went through it to make sure that what they're doing, there's actually been some practice into it. So thank you for sharing that
No, I will say one more thing, John. This is the reason that I love what you're doing with ConsiRise, because I'm literally, I would be a person in your marketplace looking for services. I've scoured the internet. I've scoured services. Sometimes looking for a therapist is a job within itself. It's just like searching for a job. You're reading all these people. Are they gonna get me? Are they gonna understand me? You just never know. So I'm very excited about what you've created, because being able to, especially when it's localized, you can see reviews, you can see, okay, that'll probably fit what it is that I'm trying to do. Because I've been in that position. I know how hard it is to find different services and stuff along this lane. So I'm excited about that too.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Big Dave, as far as your process of healing, and you talked about April 19th, leaving, being able to be sober. Was there something that happened around either that time that kind of allowed you to be on that process of healing? If you can't talk a little bit about that. And I see the t-shirt you have on too.
So here's my deal. And this, I'll just give you the story just as raw as it was. I was sitting where I sit to do my thing. I got everything I want. I got all the drugs and alcohol that I need for the day. And as I'm sitting there, I see this old man. He looked like he was 197 years old, riding a 10-speed, and he was coming to cop a $2 piece of crack. And right then, right there, it hit me. Fool, if you sit here, that's going to be you. The very next day, the police came and raided my car. They didn't raid the house. They raided my car and took me to jail. I can say I slept for about 10 of those days. When I finally did wake up, Polito, the nurse in the jail, was a friend of the family. She took me and had me and gave me IVs and nursed me back to life, and then they let me out. When they let me out of jail, I was so petrified, scared that I was going to find my way back to where I had just left, I called a friend. His name is Cuddy. And he told me to meet him. And I go to 12-step programs. I go to 12 steps. I go to AA. I go to NA. I go to anything that has a spiritual foundation to restore life. Matter of fact, I was at a meeting this morning, and we were talking about pain and suffering. And pain is going to happen. Suffering is optional. Suffering in our lifestyle now is optional. But going back, so basically, when I get out of jail, I'm at an AA meeting, and I raised my hand at that meeting. I said, "Look, man, I just got out of jail. If somebody don't hang with me today, I'm gonna go back to smoking dope." And so my partner hung with me that day, and I was staying at the Mission, David. Yeah, I ended up at that Mission. I was staying at the Mission, and I made a commitment to myself just to follow this man's direction. So he gave me direction. He gave me direction and got me through the first couple days. Then what happened was I saw a Serenity prayer on a shirt. I saw a guy had a shirt with this prayer on it. And we say the prayer all the time, but I never really internalized it and used it for the power that it holds. So in a nutshell, man, I went off and I bought 5 shirts. I had $32 to my name, and I spent them all on shirts with the Serenity prayer on them. And the thinking behind that was, man, it'd be awful hard for somebody either to sell me some dope with this prayer on my front of my shirt, or me to go cop some dope with this prayer on, or I just want folks to look at me in a different light, man. I've been Dope Fiend Dave for a long time, man. I need somebody to look at me in a different light. And this T-shirt started folks looking at me in a different light. It sold. I got off the bandwagon for a little while. I sold them and got off the bandwagon, and life happened. But it is something that I would like to get back involved with because it has a meaning and it has a message. And God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. The courage to change the things that I can. And then I need the wisdom to know the difference between what I can change and what I cannot change. And if I internalize that, that alleviates a lot of pressure, because I'm finding out that if it doesn't have anything to do with my household, me paying bills, me raising my children, then it's probably not any of my business. And when I stopped meddling in other people's business, my life got a lot simpler, a whole lot simpler. So that's what I do now. I go to 12-step programs. I still seek outside help. I still go to counsel because just because I have some time under my belt, that old guy that did all those things for those 30 years, he's still in me. And if I give him the time and if I allow it to happen, I could end up right back to where I was before, if not worse. So some things that I have done. I started a prayer group at the beginning of COVID. It was me, my mother, and 3 other women with the church. And every morning we would get on freeconferencecall.com and have prayer, which ended up just being confession. Me being able to talk about some of the way that my mind was playing tricks on me at the time. And to this day, we still have that prayer line every morning, every weekday morning at 7:30. It's dropped down to just my mother and I, but my mother and I have prayer every single day, which usually counteracts how I wake up and look in the mirror and I say, "Oh man, let's get it." You know, with that ego. Once I get in prayer, that ego gets squashed again and I get redirected to what I'm really supposed to be doing, God's will. So That's kind of my process. I've integrated church. I've integrated the 12-step program. I've integrated another program, which is Bridges Out of Poverty. I don't know if you've heard about Bridges Out of Poverty. Those three programs got me started, along with another program called Brothers United, which put me in a classroom with 30 brothers, 30 men. And then I finally got the chance to gauge myself with other men. And when I thought I was the lowest of the low, I got a chance to gauge myself with other men and see that, wait a minute, I'm not as bad. I can still compete. I can still, work with these guys. I'm all right. I might be able to do so. I might be able to make it. Those are some of the things that got me started into where I am now.
Yeah, thank you. And I just kind of two things that I got from what you were sharing. The one is when you ask for something, specifically something spiritual, you'll get it.
Mhm.
And when you ask for, you said there was a clear voice that said, follow directions, follow guidance. And that's what you have been doing ever since on that process. And the second thing I got from it is community, is being able to, whether it's 12-step or it's like you've been able to, as you have progressed in your sobriety, connect with other brothers. You mentioned some brothers, other people, community members that are also on the same wavelength or resonance that you're on. And of course, look at those things a lot differently than how you did in the past. So I just appreciated you not only knowing to say, okay, I have to ask, you getting it, following those directions, as well as intentionally building community along the way as well.
Intentionally. And it is on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It's on purpose that, like this morning, before I got to you guys, and I know you guys prepared for this call in your way, but I prepared for this call by going to a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
See, because this recovery thing is ongoing and the healing thing is ongoing. But you guys are talking about the healing, but there's always pain before the healing. See, I got to have some pain. What David shared with us today, I'm going to have to heal from. We understand? He shared some new information with me. And every time I share new information with him, or he shares new information with me regarding what happens in the past, I must make a decision to heal. Not take it and use it in a negative form, but take it and heal from it the best way that I can. And that's going to be progressive going forward, because there are some deeper, harder cuts coming as we continue to talk, as we continue to amend our relationship. There's heavier information coming.
And Lil Dave, I'll ask you, especially since one of the things that was mentioned was trust. And so I want to just ask, how have you been able to not only build up to be able to trust again, but and also during the process of healing, as we're healing, we also know we need to trust ourselves. So how have you been able to externally as well as internally trust?
He asked me to take his kids home. He asked me to take his kids home.
Yeah, you literally are the only person ever. Trusting God, just that's about the simplest answers I can give, because it's really the truth. There's so many, I have so many spiritual, I call them spiritual nuggets that I've had to follow along this path of starting with the one that we were talking about earlier, recognizing that that was the day, that his sobriety day, my son being born, and everything else up into there. Like, the more I started to like clear out like my life and size it down to what my dad said earlier, if it don't have anything to do with my kids or my house or my money or my bills, I'm not thinking about it. And so when you do that, like you silence all this noise around you, and it's a lot easier for me to hear what God wants me to do and what he doesn't want me to do. And so every time my dad came up as we're going to visit or I'm gonna go up there, I'm gonna see him, there was always just a good feeling. I was always like, okay, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. And then we would meet, the interaction will be good, the energy will be good. So I just kept taking each situation like as its own entity. How do I feel then? And then I just go on. That keeps me out of my head. It keeps me out of like overthinking. I'm an overthinker. So if I think about it too much, I'll probably talk myself out of it. And so if I just focus on praying and focus on asking God, like, what do you want me to do? Because I do understand that like part of the healing process on both sides, I have to allow it. Like it can't just be that I need you to do all this stuff. And then, but I don't even allow myself to be open to receive it. And so being open to receive it, being open to receive help, like he said, he took my kids home, which, that's one of the things just as a dad and as a person who I've grown, I just do all my own stuff. I'm not used to having like help or people around. So that's part of me trusting the fact that I trust him now. Like actually, it don't make sense for me to drive a half hour up north when he's about to drive right by their house on the way home. So just do it. In the past, it wouldn't even have been a thought. It's I'm doing it. Like my kids are not, so God, he's shown me that the plan that he has for my life and for my family and for me and for my dad and for our family and our everything, it's going to require obedience for me to be uncomfortable dealing with these things.
And Big Dave, I want to ask you the same questions. During this process of healing, how have you been able to not only trust externally, but trust yourself internally as well?
So here's the deal with the trust deal. I have faith.
Hmm.
I have faith. I know that there is nothing I could say to make David or anyone else trust me. Trust is always earned. So I went about the business of earning trust by being consistent. And also, David has helped me become more open. Not only was I scared to come to Cincinnati because of David, I was scared to come to Cincinnati because that was my ground. That was my playground for a lot. I would come down to Cincinnati and disappear for 5, 6 years. Nobody know anything. So I was also scared. I had that. I hadn't closed that door with the bad part of Cincinnati yet. So I had faith. When first time I came down there, I was scared that I was going to go cop some crack. The time that I was in the hotel room by myself, I spent most of that night on the phone with my wife because I was petrified that I was going to mess that thing up, that I was going to mess it up in the beginning. So I don't have any trust. I have faith. God told me that these were the right things to do. Being with my son, reuniting and forming a relationship with my son and my grandchildren, that didn't even need to be discussed. I just had to have faith in God and God's timing that things will come out just as they are. Mm-hmm. And I still have that faith that it's going to come out and progress and help so many families from this point on.
And I want to stay there because I think you may have just answered my next question intuitively. So I would ask, what then would, looking forward, what is your hopes not only for you and Dave's relationship, the relationship with your grandkids, as well as your hopes of either sharing or wanting to do with your healing journey and your experiences?
Well, first thing, we need to see more men talk about their pain and their healing process, because that is not a platform that is readily available this time in life. To see not only Black men, I was talking this morning at my meeting about um, men sucking it up and holding it, whatever it is, and not sharing with anyone and dying in silent pain because they were unable to share their pain with anyone. Today's society claims to be open for communication, except when one of us Black men says they're hurting. I don't know if I tried this on my Facebook. I put on there, I'm really messed up today. I don't know what to do. I'm in pain. And I posted that. And it was funny, some of the comments that came back had nothing to do with helping me. It had to do with how soft I was because I said I was in pain, or something derogatory because I said I was suffering. I want to be the one to lead the charge in stopping that critique and stopping that bullying. Every man needs help in becoming successful and staying there. Nobody does it by themselves. And it seems like the more sin you get into, the more help you're going to need from God getting out of it. So I don't know. My pride and my ego have stopped me so many years from asking for help. I found out that that has been my major defect in life, my lack of the ability to ask for help. So I've gone the totally opposite way now. Just about every situation that I'm in right now, I've asked somebody to help me or their advice, or what do you think about this? Or I don't solo dolo anymore. I don't solo dolo anymore.
And I like that too, because when you talk about so many men who either have an opportunity or not a platform to be able to talk, a lot of those conversations don't happen because there's the Blue Ray Energy Center, which is at our throat area, which is about clear and honest communication. You even talking about being able to ask and feel comfortable is allowing more prana, energy to come through your chakras to then be able to provide more love and light to come through your Blue Ray Energy Center, which is all about communication, right? And as that happens, that then has an outward effect of people want to be around you. And Dave, little Dave, I'll ask you kind of the same exact question as far as what do you see in regards to where you see the future of you all's relationship, and how do you plan to continue your healing journey, and share with others, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I guess first for me and my dad is just for us to just continue having open discussions and open conversations, him still being active in me and in my kids' life, and just watching the beauty that comes from it. It really is a joy when he's here and seeing my kids interact with him, lay on him, play with him, ask if he's coming back. So just continuing the good progress that we've made up to this point. And then from a larger perspective for viewers and just the journey that I'm on now, writing and sharing just more about my story and this information and things that I've went through. I just want anybody listening or people out there to know, me and especially, that there is help out there and that you can start to process these things and that these conversations are okay, and you're not soft or you're not emotional or you're not imbalanced or some whatever the derogatory stuff is, because men are human too. I mean, there's literally statistics out there that ever since COVID, men, not just Black men, but men are amongst the loneliest in the world right now, because the world literally just expect us to just work, provide, and all the bad things that come along the way, just suck it up, continue working, provide, but nobody ever really stops to say, how are you doing? And so my goal is for men to be able to say, it's okay. It's okay for you to go to therapy. It's okay for you to cry. It's okay for you to have emotions. It's okay for you to go reconcile some conversations. Go talk to your uncles, talk to your mom, talk to your dad, talk to people who you have some broken relationships with. And it's okay to be like, I was wrong. Or it's okay to say, I blocked you out. It's okay to address your mental health. So like my whole goal and purpose, I can feel it going forward, is just to make it okay for men to be able to heal from these things. And it requires open, honest conversation, and it requires trial and error. Like you're not going to just say, okay, I want to heal, and the first thing that you try to do to heal is going to work. It doesn't work like that. Like you have to try different things. Like I mentioned yoga, and how you just mentioned Blue Ray Energy Centers. Like being intentional means that this morning my yoga practice was to clear my Blue Ray Energy Centers, because I knew I was going to be doing a lot of talking today. And so like before meetings and before big speaking engagements, before I go perform as a poet, I make sure my yoga practice, it opens up my heart, it clears up my throat chakra, and that way I'm fully expressive and I'm very clear in my communication. But that took time. It took years. Like John, you know my struggles with the law of one. Like I wasn't the best reader. It takes that information is deep, but it helped me understand where I need to go. And then yoga helps me in the physical world, like say, this is what you do to strengthen that area of your life. And now I become a more open communicator because I've incorporated those tools. So I want people to say yoga's helpful, meditation's helpful. If you have to go see a Reiki instructor, it's helpful. But baseline, like at the end of the day, no matter what, God literally can bring you through anything. I've felt it, watched it. I know it. Like there's no doubt in my mind that there's a higher power that will always make sure, as long as you're willing to listen and go forward and give him give him the glory and the what word am I looking for? And the credit and the credit for orchestrating and making sure that we're always straight no matter what we do, that no matter how many mistakes we make, we can still wake up the next day and be renewed the next morning. Like I just want to spread that message as far reaching as I can, because I know there's just the conversations that you have in everyday life, the conversations I have with men at work, conversations we have amongst our friends. We know a lot of people are out there hurting. Like what we see on the internet and what's actually going on in real life, when you have real conversations with people, there's a huge mismatch right now. And I know it's not the most popular thing to have conversations like this, but I'm okay not being popular if I know I'm sharing the truth.
Right. Absolutely. And then too, before I ask my last question, Lil Dave, you're telling me about a full circle moment to where and I know I had saw the picture of you, your dad, and the kids, I believe, after a performance that you had. So if you can maybe kind of talk about that full circle moment, because I think it does kind of demonstrate the healing process and the impact.
Yeah, so just in terms of like the spiritual journey and everything that I keep talking about. So back in January of this year, my other friend Jonathan, he sent me a link to an open mic night, and I told him like, hey, I've been a poet for years, but I've never performed in front of people since like 2007 or 8. So I was like, all right, I want to go. I'm gonna go ahead and go. I had told him that I want to perform. This just happened to be it happened to be at a coffee shop downtown. I performed, and then that night there was an actor there, part of a play. He invited me to perform again right across the street from Washington Park, which is where my dad used to kind of hang out at, and where he was in the action at in Cincinnati. So I had wrote a poem called Divine Timing. And when I write, it's not like I can't purposely just say I want to go write a poem. Like literally, it's like God is just sending me messages like, write this. And so one day I was driving and the divine timing stuff just started coming out. Write the story about your dad getting high at Washington Park, but then bring it forth to where you are now performing at Washington Park, telling these people that no matter what you tried to do, no matter what systems, no matter what you guys depicted out there, God can clean everybody and change life for you. And so being able to perform that, it's called Divine Timing. I performed it at a poetry night when my dad was down here to visit, and that was also probably one of the most powerful and memorable moments, because to be able to tell my dad's story about being caught up in what's going on, then fast forward to like I've been able to move down here and create a good life for myself. If you think about the beginning of the story, it was my dad was in his teens dealing with drugs, my mom was in her teens in a foster home, and then you fast forward to 2024, And I've built what I feel. Well, let me say not I'm trying to get better at doing that. God has
Mhm.
allowed me to build a good life for myself and for my kids. And if you was to talk to that little boy who was born in a homeless shelter and say this is the life you're gonna have now, there's no way. You know, I wasn't the only kid born in those circumstances, and we've all lost people. And so yeah, it was very full circle for us to even be taking pictures together. That's a powerful thing within itself, because you got to think all those years where he wasn't around, that's a lot of photograph opportunities that we didn't get. So just the opportunity that there is a picture that exists with me, my dad, and my son. There's a picture that exists with me, my dad, my son, and my granddad, where there's David Oxner 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I cherish those moments. When God sent me that poem to write and I wrote it, it just came out. It took like 5 minutes, and then you put it out into the world, and now I've created a play out of it. It's called There's One in Every Family. Going to be going on in Washington Park July 21st, and I'm excited about that because I've taken that poem and I've stretched it out into a live action stage play, and we're going to talk more about these stories. We're going to not only tell that story, we're going to tell some other stories that just real life stuff going on, that whether it's spiritual or whether it's mental health, but we're going to touch on it, and I'll continue to share it because I think it'll resonate with a lot of people.
And Big Dave, real quick, I saw you smiling. You're doing a lot of smiling while Little Dave was talking. Is there just anything you want to share before I ask my last question?
Um, Basically that at this stage of the game, this is not about me, and it's not about David. It's not even about you, John. Um, it's about it. I have a service to provide for those who are going through or have been through anything similar to what David and I have been through and going through. I realized that God didn't save me for me. He saved me for y'all. My life is a testimony. I don't take not one day's credit for this sobriety, because if I say it all the time, and I do it on purpose because I want people to really understand that sober doesn't mean you're out of the fire. Sober means that you've made a decision for today not to be that person. Tomorrow could be a totally different decision. Um, I want that to be forever present because it's that serious. Is that serious? Other than that, David, I'm just grateful that we have been able to come together. You don't know how awkward it was. So when they were starting taking pictures at your last show and I was there, I don't know if you realized that I drifted away on purpose. I was scared to take the picture with you. You had to call me back down to take the picture. If you remember correctly, I was gone.
No, I saw it. I saw you back, and I was just like, I think he don't think I want to take a picture. So, yeah, come on, let's. Yeah.
Yeah, I was backing away like, okay, I ain't gonna crowd, let me back off.
No, I invited you. I wanted you there. I invited you down. I purposely performed that poem. Yeah, I put it in the middle of it because I didn't know I was gonna make it to the. What's up, man? Didn't know I
Hey,
was
man,
gonna
say
make it.
hi. Say hi. Now go bye-bye. Go play.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
very
boy.
not a lot of stuff that I do on accident. So
Okay.
I was very intentional about performing that. I was very